current president of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation, which sponsors these awards every year. And I've known Emily Earley for, I think, 48 years, since she was just a bit of a girl. And loved her every minute of that time. She's a great lady. So we're very happy that you could all come today to recognize her achievements and accomplishments. The reason for doing this kind of special ceremony is simple. We had our regular Hall of Fame induction at the Schmidt Reserve and the Century Auditorium in Stevens Point in April. And Emily wasn't quite up to the trip. As it happened, I wasn't either. So we're both here today.
Thank you. Well, it is really an honor to be here today. And I think many of us are really, really happy to be here in the same room with Emily Earley, and I'm delighted to say she needs to lose some weight. It's great because you can't hear me, so. Only interpret the good parts. Or the quiet part of the environmental movement. They bought land, they managed that land, they worked for biodiversity, but they really didn't get involved in government or politics. Except that science was telling them something else. Nature Conservancy is also a science-based organization, and science was telling them that you really can't, if your mission is to protect biodiversity, you really can't protect it by buying 500 acres, 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres. You really need to think about entire landscapes and entire ecosystems. And in order to do that, you really have to think about public policy. You really can't meet your science-driven mission of protecting biological diversity unless you deal with the bigger landscape issues, and that takes into government. And that's the point at which I got to meet Emily Earley, because Emily, of course, had been on the board of the Nature Conservancy, had been a founding member of the Nature Conservancy, and was steeped in the Nature Conservancy's way of doing business and its approach to issues. And it took someone like Emily Earley to understand that an organization needed to change in order to be true to its core mission. And so I always remember the very first words that Emily Earley said to me when I met her at the first annual meeting that I attended. I was introduced as the Nature Conservancy's first government relations director in Wisconsin, and she said, and it's a position that's been long needed, young man. And throughout my years at the Conservancy, I really learned, well, a lot, frankly. A lot I do as mayor, I learned at the Nature Conservancy in terms of how professionally it was run, how it approached issues in a business-like way. But much of that I learned from Emily Earley specifically. Emily really taught me how to be a board member and how to be a mayor, how to lead an organization. Emily really understands that, you know, board members, we have so many nonprofits in Madison. Board members of those nonprofits should go through Emily Earley training. And we all know what we're talking about. Emily understands the job of a board member is to know what's going on, to care for the fundamental mission of the organization, to guide its basic policy, and then to lay off. She is not a micromanager, she's a leader, and there's a big difference. And she understands that one of the things that a board member needs to do is keep the organization functioning. There is no better fundraiser than Emily Earley. People cross the street when they see her coming. Continue to grow. I think Emily started to learn Spanish in her 80s. How you can continue to grow and continue to get the most out of life. And so in addition to all the wonderful things that Emily has accomplished for our community and for conservation and for the environmental movement, I think, at least for myself, she has accomplished more by being an inspiration about what I can continue to contribute for maybe another 40 years. And I think that's probably Emily's greatest legacy. So finally, after all these years, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame got around to recognizing that and had the good sense to induct Emily into the Conservation Hall of Fame. And while it's unfortunate that Emily couldn't be there in Stevens Point, in some ways this is better, because all of us would not have been able to get up to Stevens Point. And so in some ways this is actually better for Emily to be surrounded by her friends, surrounded by colleagues, surrounded by people who have benefited from her work and her wisdom all these years, and to have us present that. And as the governor presents that award to her, I think we'll all be essentially holding the governor's hand as he does that. So it's very, very appropriate. So I do get to introduce the next speaker, and I think that when we think about Wisconsin governors and what they've contributed, I think as time goes by, people will recognize the contributions that Jim Doyle has made. The largest expansion of the Sturgeon Fund was done under Jim Doyle. His career as Attorney General and now as Governor, but I know that one of his proudest accomplishments is to be able to call Emily Earley his friend. Ladies and gentlemen, your Governor, Jim Doyle.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here at Capitol Lakes. See my mother-in-law here, who's just a wonderful facility. We spend a fair amount of our time here, and I'm really pleased to be here to give this award to Emily Earley. I apologize for my attire, although with a bunch of greenies, I guess it's okay to be dressed this way. I'm not in my normal governor uniform, but I am on the way to the state fair, and so I'm in the appropriate governor state fair. But I really wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to stop by here for this really important moment. I thank the mayor not only for the kind induction, but obviously we have one of the great conservationists in the state, who is the mayor of Madison, and who probably already has done enough to merit consideration someday in 40 years from now for the Hall of Fame. I expect in the years between now and when he may actually be considered for induction, there are going to be a lot more accomplishments for him. And Eugene, I thank you and the directors of the Conservation Hall of Fame for what you have done to make sure that we honor people who have done so much for our state. This is obviously, I don't need to tell this group, but just an incredibly beautiful state. Last week I spent 3 days going along the Lake Michigan coast. So we started early one morning in Washington Island and ended up 2 days later in Kenosha. Stopped by all of the beautiful state parks and the small harbor towns and the big cities. One of the things we were doing was announcing the first round of preliminary grants that are going out as part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Really wonderful things that we've been waiting for a long, long time. That the stage was set by the passing of the Great Lakes Compact that for the first time ever passed by all of the Great Lakes states, passed by the United States Congress, signed by the President, and we now have a framework for actual management of the Great Lakes in a joint way based on science and data and really managing those lakes in a way to help restore them and to make them the centers of our environment, centers of commerce, and all that they do for us. But I was the year earlier, I had done a similar trip to really highlight the west border of Wisconsin. We started in the far southwest corner and ended high up on the St. Croix River, following the Mississippi and St. Croix all the way along that border of Wisconsin. So many others that have come along, but she has also been instrumental in so many of the important institutions that today are at the foundation of what we do in Wisconsin to protect our environment. So from the UW-Madison's Institute for Environmental Studies, the Nature Conservancy, of course, the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute, and what she's done in Northland College and Ashland, the 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin, the Dane County Natural Heritage Land Trust, the Wisconsin Conservation Corps, the University of Wisconsin Arboretum. The list goes on of the things that Emily not only was a member of, but in many of these instances she was the founding member and the person that really created these institutions that now work for us year after year. She has led a long and incredibly interesting life. I personally have never, I don't have a time in my memory that I didn't know Emily Earley. Whenever you first start knowing or having a memory, whatever that is, 4 or 5 years of age, Emily has been there through that entire period of time for me, which gets longer as we go along, for all of us. And she has been, as you all know, not only a great, great conservation leader, but she has been a wonderful and dear friend to so many of us. There are things that we could go on about. I'll just mention one that the mayor mentioned. But the stewardship program, in just the last 7 years, we have protected more than 275,000 acres of land across the state of Wisconsin. It is, without question, the single best state program of land conservation in the United States of America. Through our work with the Conservancy, all of the other local land trusts, all of the other organizations that we work with, we have been able to leverage, and increasingly now, we work with big timber companies, we work with so many different people to leverage this. So from protecting, as we just recently did, I think 16,000 acres of working forest land in northeast Wisconsin, to making sure that kids in Milwaukee have some green space along the Milwaukee River where they can ride their bikes and be able to enjoy a little bit of non-asphalt life. The Stewardship Fund has done all of that. And of course, Emily's commitment to the land trust, to land conservation, to the Stewardship Fund itself is largely responsible for getting that done in that Hall of Fame. And so on behalf of the people of the state of Wisconsin, I am proud to congratulate her and present her with the award honoring her for her induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame.
Okay. And where was this taken?
This was that's Nicaragua.
That's still Nicaragua?
I think so.
That must have been your first trip.
Certainly a tropical trip.
Now, Gene and I went with Emily on a trip to Nicaragua. That was quite a trip.
That was the first trip. You were on that, huh?
Yeah, Gene and I.
Yeah.
And Emily.